at a whopping $900 billion. In his weekly address, President Obama ratcheted up the rhetoric, insisting Congress must pass the bill quickly to help stop the growing recession.
If we don't move swiftly to put this plan in motion, our economic crisis could become a national catastrophe.
The Senate is likely to vote on the stimulus package next week. Still with the struggling economy, as many of you unfortunately know, Canada shed 129,000 jobs in January. That's the worst month of employment losses in Canada's recorded history. Overall, the unemployment rate climbed to 7.2%. That's up more than half a point from December. Ontario was hardest hit, losing 71,000 jobs, but there were also huge declines in British Columbia and Quebec. Most of the layoffs were in manufacturing, but few sectors were spared.
I think we're going to see more losses in natural resources, forestry, mining. Retail is going to start laying off.
Despite calls from the opposition to do more, Prime Minister Stephen Harper says he won't bulk up the economic stimulus package, and he warned Canadians to expect more bad news in the coming months. Joining us now is Tom Vassos from the Rotman School of Management. Thank you very much for joining us. These are absolutely scary days for a lot of Canadians out there. What can you tell us about whether this is progressing into something a lot worse than we originally thought?
Well, it does look pretty bad so far. I mean, we haven't seen numbers like that in a long time. Ontario was especially hard hit. Out of those 71,000, about half of those were in the manufacturing sector, which means about 1 out of 20 manufacturing jobs were lost in that month alone. So it's not looking good right now.
Now, Mr. Vassos, 1 month is just 1 month, but does this set a trend at all for the rest of the year? Is that a fear of yours?
It certainly is, and there's projections from organizations like the TD Bank or others that are projecting over 300,000 losses this year. Look at other recessions where we've hit 9 and 10%, which is being projected for later this year in terms of the unemployment rate. So it looks like it's going to continue most of the year, especially as we get the spillover effect from the troubles that the U.S. is having.
Now, as these numbers come in month after month, sometimes week after week, we get bits of news from companies laying off people. What do you think the government has to do in terms of its stimulus package? Should that be changed at all?
Well, they've already announced $64 billion over a couple of years. I mean, governments can't make economies. It's businesses and consumers that do that. I mean, they can help stimulate some things by doing that, but they can't create an entire economy. It's really up to us to spend, to move into higher paying jobs, to do things like that that are really going to get the economy going.
Now, given that, what should companies be doing? I mean, as I mentioned, a lot of companies over the past week have announced layoffs to, in the thousands. What do companies have to do to try to turn things around?
Well, research really shows that in tough economic times like this, it really doubles the chance of companies actually being able to change their industry rankings, to invest in things, to grow, to leapfrog ahead of their competitors. And there's great evidence of that, of Canadian companies doing exactly that in various sectors. And it doesn't just apply to the private sector, it's the public sector as well. If you look at the competitiveness of cities, for example, global banking centers around the world, with all of this upheaval, Toronto has just jumped from 16th place to 12th place, surpassing other cities like Paris and Dublin and San Francisco. So upheavals like this really provide opportunities for both private and public sector organizations to leapfrog ahead of our competitors.
Could we see the government at some point in the months ahead decide, listen, we got to cut taxes even more to try to get people spending?
Well, that certainly is a possibility, and they could even increase the stimulus package, but we have to look at the reality of where we're at right now. According to the Fraser Institute, we're total debt in Canada is still $790 billion, and if you add old age security, Canada Pension Plan, and Medicare obligations, it's $2.4 trillion. It's not like we have a lot of money lying around waiting to throw at these problems. So it is a tough situation to be in for governments, and they can't really change that strategy every single time an individual monthly unemployment report comes out.
In the past, when governments have stepped in like this with a stimulus package, how long does it take before it actually starts working on the economy?
Yes, it could take several months because those investments, get announced, but the shovel doesn't get into the ground potentially until months later, and so several of those things do take a while. The Martin Prosperity Institute just released a report this week actually talking about how we probably should be moving away from bailing out more of the old age industrial type industries and looking forward more to the next generation, the next creative age, as they're calling it, that we're moving towards. How do we invest in those areas? And they're really saying education is the lifeblood of our future economic growth and prosperity, especially in Ontario.
In the past, how long does it take once a recession ends before the economy is back to where it was before the recession started?
Well, once again, it depends how long and protracted it is. The government is currently projecting that we're going to bounce out of this particular recession very quickly. I'm not quite as optimistic as that. I think it's going to be longer and more protracted, especially as we see a long and protracted impact in the U.S. market, because about 75% of our trade goes to the U.S. So we are very highly dependent on what's happening in the U.S. as well.
Tom Vassos, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.